There's something I meant to do on the last episode, and I just totally blanked. And we took a month off. I had a month to prepare our first episode back, and I forgot to do this, so we're gonna do it now, Andrew.
Okay.
Every movie we're covering this month, you know what month it is, has been reviewed by Roger Ebert, and I think up and down, he's got some interesting takes on all of them. So I want to sort of acknowledge Ebert's review of each of these movies. Just going to jump to the end of his review, how he wraps it up. But of course, last week we talked about Deep Blue Sea, a movie that Roger Ebert awarded 3 out of 4 stars. Not a bad review. And here's how he wraps it up. The movie is essentially one well-done action sequence after another. It involves all the usual situations in movies where the fierce creature chases victims through the bowels of a ship / spacecraft / building, like Alien movies, Deep Rising, etc. It's just that it does them well. It doesn't linger on the special effects. Some of the sharks look like cartoons, but it knows how to use timing, suspense, quick movement, and surprise. Especially surprise. There is a moment in this movie when something happens that is completely unexpected, and it's over in a flash, a done deal, and the audience laughs in delight because it was so successfully surprised. In a genre where a lot of movies are retreads of the predictable, Deep Blue Sea keeps you guessing.
That's really nice.
I mean, he nailed it, right? Like, obviously, it's a silly thing to say.
It's like one step from saying it's a movie that knows exactly what it is. Like, but like, he's basically saying the movie, like, leans into every single thing that it possibly could to make it super entertaining.
Yeah. There's potential pitfalls in a movie like this being a retread, but it manages to get enough surprise and execute so well that it's actually a fun time. I think, again, a silly thing to say about the greatest critic of all time, but he kind of nails that movie, I think, in that review.
And again, that's says about Lake Placid.
I can't wait to hear what he had to say about it. That's assuming I remember to read the review during this episode. So, Andrew, help me do that.
No promises.
And now, let's get started. Theme song.
We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I'm joined as always by my prehistoric co-host, Andrew Williams. Say something to the listeners, Andrew.
Something for the listeners.
Each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Big Animal Month! And this week we are talking the 1999 film Lake Placid. You know, I lean away from the microphone to announce this theme every time I do it. The spikes are still quite large, so apologies to every listener's ears, but it's the only way I know how to say it, damn it. Andrew, Lake Placid, what is your history with this movie? Is this one that you saw in theaters?
Nope. Definitely not. Much like Deep Blue Sea, it was an odd thing that I did not come to until much later. I don't think I actually watched it until just a few years ago.
Oh, really?
When that bundle we bought went on sale of so many of the movies. But yeah, I'd heard about it obviously, but like it is a very, very strange movie that just has this. Sometimes feels like it has a reputation. Sometimes it doesn't. Like it feels like it exists, but also doesn't exist sometimes. But so yeah, I've known about it, heard about it, never really sat down and watched it. Haven't watched it a lot, but have grown to appreciate some aspects of it that I think are either intentionally or not pretty good. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. But yeah, definitely not. Can't say there were any Lake Placid posters on the wall in my room when I was a kid.
Now, the question is, you bought that bundle, which I did as well, and I think it's every movie in the series except number 2. I'm sure it's a weird rights thing or whatever, but it's the initial one, and then there's 3, and then, like, the final chapter, and I think it also has Lake Placid versus Anaconda crossover or whatever. Pretty much every movie after this is straight to sci-fi, straight to DVD.
Yeah, there's Lake Placid, which is 99, and then 8 years later, they do Lake Placid 2, which is...
with Cloris Leachman.
I guess Cloris Leachman coming in to sub in for Betty White there.
Yeah, I'm curious if it's like a new character or just a recast, but kind of makes me want to track it down.
It's the same last name, but I think that's it. So I'm not entirely sure how that works, but there's Lake Placid 2, then there's Lake Placid 3, Lake Placid, the final chapter, so it follows the Friday the 13th methodology there. And then we get
by
Lake
calling
Placid
it the final
versus
chapter,
Anaconda,
and then continuing after.
And then continuing. And then Lake Placid versus Anaconda, and then ultimately there is, in 2018, Lake Placid Legacy. I don't know why you would call it that when it has like none of the people that you would associate with this franchise. Not that you associate anyone with this franchise necessarily, but Joey Pants is in it, so maybe that makes it worth watching. I don't know, but either way, it was a movie that came out, did its thing, and then sat for a long time until somebody was like, you know what, we can use that name to make a bunch of direct-to-TV movies.
I don't remember if I saw this in theaters. I want to say I did, but maybe I just saw it as soon as it came out on VHS or whatever. I saw it back in the day. I saw it as a kiddo. I definitely remember the trailers. I remember like Betty White being in the trailers and certain scenes, because even though I've seen this movie, very few specifics stuck in my brain. I bought that bundle a few years back like you did, but I didn't rewatch it until this week preparing for this podcast, and boy, oh boy, there's a lot to talk about. there's a lot to talk about.
Boy, oh boy. I think that's about. I don't know how that's not on the Blu-ray, the back of the Blu-ray. Boy, oh boy.
The movie was released July 16th, 1999. That's just 2 weeks before Deep Blue Sea. It's made on a budget of $35 million. At the box office worldwide, it just brings in $56.9 million. I was a little surprised by that. I thought this was like a mid-size hit, but definitely underperformed. Critically, not well received. It holds a 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it's just under 100 reviews. So not quite panned, but not glowing. The audience score, just like Deep Blue Sea, is lower than the critics. 37% audience score. Again, a little surprised. I thought there'd be enough people out there that were nostalgic for this movie or just enjoyed the camp, especially with all the sequels, that would leave more positive reviews, but that is not the case.
'Tis not. Yeah, I'm actually a little surprised by that, kind of out the gate, that we've got two movies that I feel like would at least have some sort of kind of cult following, I guess. Like, you know, maybe there was this like surge of fandom that was kind of like, hey, these movies are better than you remember. And no, not the case. Nobody's going to bat for these guys. And like you said, in fact, the audiences seem to like them less than critics did. So, yeah, that's kind of wild to me. But what are you going to do on Big Animal? Sorry. Big Animal Butt.
Interesting creative team behind this movie, Andrew.
Yes.
One writer, David E. Kelly. Someone who is very, very well known for the work in television. Sort of almost like prestige TV before that was even a thing. Responsible for shows like Doogie Howser, Chicago Hope, Ally McBeal, Boston Public, Big Little Lies. I mean, just massive in the TV drama space. As far as movies, very few credits in film, only 4. And the two biggest ones are this movie we're talking about today, Lake Placid and Mystery Alaska, which releases the same year. Two movies that I never would guess have the same writer. Mystery Alaska is that hockey movie that I always thought was a sort of like beloved film, but I looked at the reviews that it's not well reviewed. Maybe that movie was not as well received as I thought. I thought people had a soft spot for that, but I don't know. I've never actually seen it, but I do remember that movie coming out. But again, David E. Kelly being the one behind these movies, never would have guessed.
No, me either. Yeah, you mentioned, his laundry list of credits, which, you didn't even touch on all of them. The guy's basically been doing stuff forever. Even going all the way back to LA Law and things like that in the 80s into the 90s. So he's got just tons of credits to his name. Like you said, kind of prestige television before that was a thing. And now even still does some prestige television stuff. Like he did 9 Perfect Strangers for Hulu. He does the Lincoln Lawyer Show for Netflix. He does Presumed Innocent on Apple TV featuring the greatest actor of all time. So he's definitely still out there, still doing his thing. But yeah, these are just some odd early credits that he's just got bumbling or kind of bubbling around his filmography. But fun fact, David E. Kelly was drafted in the 10th round of the World Hockey Association draft in 1977 by the Cincinnati Stingers.
Hey, Andrew, that is a fun fact. What was the show you mentioned with the greatest actor of all time? Presumed Innocent?
Presumed Innocent.
I'm not familiar with. Is it Michael Keaton? Jake Gyllenhaal? Ryan Gosling?
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Jake Gyllenhaal. Okay.
Jake Gyllenhaal.
There's a lot of greatest actors of all time. You got to be more. There was
a version of it in like 1990 that starred Harrison Ford as like a feature film. Not bad. Pretty good movie overall. Kind of your standard legal drama of the era. But yeah, it's a book. So we're doing another adaptation of the book as a miniseries starring Jake Gyllenhaal. So now I have to watch it.
And the movie is directed by Stephen Miner, alum of the show. He also directed Halloween H2O the year prior, but probably most known as a producer on the Friday the 13th series. Sort of that series has the equivalent of a showrunner. It would be Stephen Miner, at least through the early installments. It's a huge weird rights thing with it. But early on, he's running that ship, even steps into the director's chair for parts 2 and 3. Interesting career, a lot of horror stuff. Even though I don't really think of this movie as a horror, Wikipedia says it's a comedy horror, which not how I would describe it, but I guess isn't too far out of his wheelhouse. But I was curious about his other movies. I think the last directing credit he has, if you haven't looked at it already, Private Valentine, Blonde and Dangerous, released in 2008, starring Jessica Simpson. So he's done it all, Andrew.
And that same year, he directs a remake of Day of the Dead for some reason. What a career. Just speaks for itself. But yeah, just an odd thing. He's, directed Friday the 13th. He's directed Halloween. He's directed Giant Crocodiles. He's directed Jessica Simpson. He directs an extremely strange movie called My Father the Hero that I do not recommend looking up. He's also directed the Tom Arnold, Rick Moranis 90s comedy Big Bully. Like, just such a strange career full of strange stuff with the horror comedy House thrown right in the middle of it. Does not direct the sequel with the greatest title of all time, but does kick off the House franchise so that we can get to that greatest sequel title of all time, which, as I'm sure you all know, is House 2, the second story.
It'll never be topped. Andrew, I've never heard of My Father the Hero. You told me not to look into it, so I looked into it. This movie comes out in 1994 and stars Katherine Heigl. Katherine Heigl, 1994. I had no idea. But wasn't she young?
16. She is
Okay.
16 when this movie comes out.
Interesting. Well, Andrew, here's the plot. Nicole is 14 and goes on vacation in the Bahamas with her father, Andre Arnell. She falls in love with a 17-year-old Ben, but her dad finds him way too old for her. Tired of being treated like a child, Nicole makes up a whole story to make herself more interesting, where Andre is actually her lover who saved her from a life of Andre's her dad, but her story is that her dad is her lover who saved her from a life of debauchery a few years earlier. Andre is unaware of his daughter's lies and the reputation she is building for him, leading to a cascade of misunderstandings and misled confrontations. They're wringing comedy out of that, Andrew. She tells this guy that her dad is her lover to sound more interesting. Oh, boy.
Also,
sounds like a
this
hoot,
movie
Andrew. I don't know.
So you guys want no, because don't touch this movie with a 10-meter pole. Because this is all made more complicated by the fact that her father is played by Gerard Depardieu, who, if you've ever looked up, is horrible. Like, this movie is just, everything about it is wrong. And it is such an insane thing that it exists. It is a remake of a French film where also Gerard Depardieu stars in it. So he stars in two versions of this movie. And yeah, you spent more time talking about it than it deserved.
You gotta wonder why this guy is so drawn to this role. He's gonna do it twice, Andrew.
You gotta wonder.
All right.
You gotta wonder.
Yeah, you go down the Wikipedia rabbit hole if you want. You get the idea. What a weird thing. Andrew, we're off track here. Let's get back on track. Let's talk about this movie, Lake Placid. Let's dive into all the positives, everything we like about this movie. Andrew, are you ready?
I am ready.
Something in the dark waters of Black Lake, Maine is attacking humans and local wildlife. An eclectic group of individuals assemble to investigate the situation, including a paleontologist named Kelly, Fish and Wildlife Officer Jack, Sheriff Hank, and a professor of mythology named Hector. Together, they discover the culprit is in fact a 32-foot crocodile that migrated from across the globe at least 2 years previous, and a local elderly woman named Dolores has been secretly feeding the reptile. Now they must decide whether they should capture the creature or simply destroy it. Andrew, first things first. This is an 82-minute film, something I appreciate. And I don't mean just short is good because it's a bad movie. I want to get out of there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you're going to make a movie about a big animal, it doesn't need to be 2 hours. It doesn't mean to. It's a 90-minute film if I've ever heard one. Get in, get out, have a good time. So I appreciate that. Also, 32-foot crocodile. Andrew, that's a big crocodile. I realize that. I thought it would be bigger, though. Maybe based on the poster, both this and Deep Blue Sea are basically identical posters. It's a woman in the water with the creature behind them with their jaws open. It's just one's a crocodile, one's a shark. But it looks like they can swallow a person whole, which I thought, and I had seen this movie before. I thought it was so big it would come out swallow whole. It's not quite that big. It is big though. I don't want to downplay it, but I was expecting something a little bigger. I don't know.
It's a weird thing where the movie is trying to it feels like it's trying to still sort of be in the realm of possible. It's not quite accepting and leaning into the heart of what a big animal is. It's not really wanting to go that hard. So there's this realm of, I hesitate to say realism because realism is not the right word. And
well,
I hate
it's like
using words
there's
grounded, but
they don't do the story of it's been genetically altered, made in a lab. It was
it's not a mutant,
hidden underground, and we drilled and released it. There's no crazy story like that.
Yeah.
It's just, sometimes they get big. This one's really big.
Yeah, they're saying, and they mentioned that there's other ones that are comparable size, but they've never really been able to capture them. It's it's a weird thing where like it still wants to sort of be like it's just it's big, but it's in the realm. It's not out of the realm of possibility that a crocodile could be this big. What's more odd about the fact is that it's there specifically. That's kind of the bigger point that they make throughout the film, is that it's odd that it's in this lake.
Andrew, before we jump into all those specifics, though, let's talk about the cast of this movie. And you know what we're going to do. We're going to start with the high point, best casting, best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So Andrew, kick us off here. Who in this cast is getting your Mark Strong Award?
It is going to... it is quite a interesting cast, and there's a lot going on here, but watching it back, there's a bit of a bit in this movie that got a little bit of notoriety on the internet, and it was pretty funny to watch when they were leaning into it. But I will be going with Brendan Gleeson as Sheriff Hank Keogh, however you say that. There's this gag that he has throughout the movie, at least in the first like 20 minutes, where he says the word sarcastic out loud when he's being sarcastic. And I found that really funny for some reason. Like there's a section where the wildlife guy shows up and he says something to him and he goes, "Oh, a whole sentence sarcastic," and then walks off. Like he throws sarcastic at the end of the lines. It genuinely just vocalizes it. And I don't know why he does that. I'm guessing he misread a line somewhere and they thought it was really funny, so they left it in. But like it's dropped later, like when they stop joking around and it gets more serious. But throughout the movie, he's one of the only characters that I think kind of really leans in to kind of the personality. There's a scene where he gets strung up by a trap, and one of the characters like leans down and she's like, "Sheriff," and he just turns while hanging upside down very calmly and goes, "Yes." And she, like he's still like, he's like, so the way he plays the character, the way he kind of goes, I just find it all very funny. There's a personality there that, you know, it's definitely some lines that I would say not have aged super well, or maybe some little some of that classic casual misogyny of the 90s. But he's one of the few characters I think that's got a personality that I don't find super grating.
Yes.
But
yes.
So in that regard, he stands out for me. Hashtag PP, folks. Yeah, and you know, Brendan Gleeson, alum of the show, in at least once, if not a variety of ways.
Well, he's that one
he
random scene in Mission Impossible 2, which is
he's got that scene in Mission Impossible 2, which I'm sure I talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've talked about him for any other reason. Not that I necessarily needed another reason to talk about him.
We've brought up In Bruges at least 40 times on the show. We haven't covered it, but we just found ways to bring it up. So I'm sure we've talked about him then.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but it doesn't look like it. He's in The Village. Stupid.
There we go.
In The Village. Yeah, he's like he's a decently sized character in the Village.
Well, he's a decently sized character in most of his movies.
Yeah, because of his tremendous acting talent, Chris. I
love Brendan Gleeson. 28 Days Later, this is probably the first thing I saw him in, but like I didn't know the name Brendan Gleeson. 28 Days Later, which comes a few years after this, might be the first time I was like, dude, this guy is special
here.
Yeah. He's like, I don't even. Would you call him a character actor? I think he's something beyond that. I don't really know how to classify him, but he's usually not the star or leading man. He's usually playing supporting roles, but is just damn good at what he does. And I mean, totally respectfully here. You've got your leading man movie star look. You've got your classically attractive people. You've got your unconventionally attractive people. And then you have Brendan Gleeson. Like, he is just no other way to describe him than Brendan Gleeson. Interesting looking guy. You see him on the street, you don't think oh, that's one of the greatest actors of our time. Oh, that's a movie star. I've said very similar things about Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, I love that it's just their insane talent and skill that has driven them to the point in career where they end up. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I hope it doesn't sound backhanded, but I'm pretty sure if you've seen this guy's work, you know exactly where I'm coming from there. I do love him in this movie. There's this, I didn't even pick up on this sarcastic thing that you're talking about, but there's a movie that most people probably heard of called Troll 2, which I've seen a million times with friends. And there's this line where there's this witch in the movie, and she's talking to the human family, and she says, "Your daughter looks appetizing." And the mom goes, "Excuse me?" And the witch just goes, "Provocative." And we always go like, what? Like, why did she just say provocative? And our theory was that in the script, it says, "Your daughter looks appetizing, parentheses, provocative." Like, say it in a provocative way. And she just said it out loud, and it's directed by someone who doesn't speak English, which it is. And they just left it in. So I imagine, like, I don't think Brendan Gleeson would do that, except, like you said, maybe once, either as a goof or genuinely by mistake one time and they like it. But I don't know the origins of that. I'm curious if he's ever addressed it in interviews, though.
That would be definitely a question I'd like to ask him, or maybe if there's like a commentary track, but I'm not about to buy Lake Placid on disc just to have a commentary track. But because he has a conversation with the guy on the boat at the beginning of the film about how he thinks all these guys are just so sarcastic, and they give him like one-word sarcastic answers. And then I can see that being something that like continues on. So I can only assume that like he accidentally said sarcastic out loud after like that conversation, and it just stuck. But it's like I said, it's only in like the first 20 to 30 minutes of the movie, but I just find it very funny. And then it was sealed for me, that scene where he's hanging upside down. That was really for me. But
I love that scene. I love that reaction. And there's another time when he falls into a trap. This one's like literally a pit. Like he's walking and like you just see him fall into the ground. It's got to be like an 8-foot fall, because once he's in there, like his head's not sticking out anything. And he falls in, you hear him scream, "Ah!" as he falls. And then like there's a 2-second pause and he just goes, "Damn it." Like if you just fell that far, like broke an ankle, and he's just like, damn it. It's so good.
I think, and just speaking of the end, I do really love Brendan Gleeson. I think he's a fantastic actor. The father of Domhnall Gleeson, which might be also why we talked about him, because we've talked about him a few times, I think. But most people, I would say a lot of people probably know him from Harry Potter, where he plays Mad-Eye Moody in a couple of those movies. Only a couple of them, I think. You think
that's Brendan Gleeson?
Brendan Gleeson, sorry. Domhnall Gleeson plays Bill Weasley in those movies. There you go. Sorry, I'm not an idiot. About that, at least.
I just wanted to clarify for anybody listening.
He's in like 4, 5, and 6 of the Brendan Gleeson. Back to him. He's in a few of those, so a lot of people gained some awareness of him there. But then in the movies of kind of Martin McDonagh, and then actually his brother, John McDonagh. So In Bruges, Banshees of Inisherin, those are all Martin McDonagh. But then he actually does a bunch of movies with his brother. John Michael McDonagh does one called The Guard with him and Don Cheadle, and does another one called Calvary, and both are extremely good. Just great performances. And if you're looking for something where you kind of get to see him more in a driving role, whereas most of the stuff he tends to be pretty supporting in the bigger roles. But obviously In Bruges is basically him and Colin Farrell the whole movie. Banshees of Inisherin is him and Colin Farrell the whole movie. But then stuff like Calvary and The Guard is kind of him front and center. And he really gets to show off his ability. So I definitely recommend checking out those if you want to see what the man is capable of. Otherwise, you can, Edge of Tomorrow, Mission Impossible 2 is one scene. There's lots of places you can see him, but I think those are great showcases of his comedy and his dramatic ability.
Andrew, up until you said the words Brendan Gleeson, I thought I knew exactly who you were talking about for the Mark Strong Award. You talked about their tone
Oh, I
every
know
time they're
where
on
you're going.
screen. The internet loves it. I thought you were going to mention who I'm giving the Mark Strong Award to, which is Betty White as Dolores, the old lady that has been feeding the crocodile and is just perfect. I mean, Betty White as a whole, as her whole career, just phenomenal. I mean, this what is it? A 80-year career in television. I mean, she's been called the first lady of TV for a reason. Across so many variety shows and her own show and sitcoms and guest appearances and several key film roles, supporting roles. Everyone knows who Betty White is. Everyone loves her. She's, there's certain actors today where, very few where we feel like they're just universally loved. Everyone loves Tom Hanks, Keanu Reeves. Betty White is the first person I can think of that just everyone loved her, just universally loved, just a great person, a great talent. And I've thought about this a lot, oddly. What exactly it is about her performances that was so well received? What made him so great? Because the whole thing of, like, if you want to boil it down to she's like an old lady that says vulgar things or things that younger people would say, like, that's been done quite a bit. Like, a rapping granny here or there, or a granny that drops a curse word. But usually, 99% of the time, pretty much anytime it's not Betty White, the joke is they're so out of their element doing that. Like, they don't rap well. Like, they don't, they use a slang that sounds awkward coming from them, or you don't expect them to curse. But Betty White was able to sell it. Like, it always feels like she's in on the joke. She delivers it well. That's how she normally talks. I mean, she's quite vulgar in this movie, and it works. Not just because, it's an old lady saying that, but it's just a very funny old lady, a very funny character saying that. I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but I think the key is how well she does it. She doesn't feel out of her element when she does things that should be out of her element for being an elderly lady.
I think part of it that separates it from kind of your classic old person says vulgar things is that Betty White has this existing reputation already. You look back at stuff like the Golden Girls, or even back further, like in the Golden Girls, she plays a very, like, innocent to a fault character that is just part of this group, and that's kind of her thing. She's the naive, innocent one. Still very funny, do not misunderstand me. So you have this kind of pseudo reputation of being like America's grandma, of, like, being around for a really long time, being just seemingly a really nice person, built by this kind of career of, to a certain point, relatively wholesome, funny appearances. But then you get stuff like this, where we're clearly banking on the fact that you know who Betty White is and you know what Betty White's reputation is. So part of the joke is that it's so against the grain for Betty White to say this. It's not like the old lady in, like, an Adam Sandler movie, who you don't really have that kind of lifetime association with. Like, it's a legacy that makes the turn feel way more earned, I think, than somebody just kind of being old and saying vulgar things, which can still be a very funny comedic device. Don't misunderstand me. But when you have a it's kind of like Bob Saget in a way, like when Bob Saget spent a decade as the dad on Full House, and then all of a sudden does a stand-up special where he's the most vulgar man you've ever heard.
Yeah.
You're just like, whoa, there's almost this whiplash of, like, that doesn't make sense. But with Betty White, it doesn't feel quite, she's not, nearly as vulgar as Bob Saget was in his comedy. But there's this kind of lifetime of kind of comedic innocence that gives way to this turn of kind of the self-awareness of her looking back at her career and the reputation that she has, while also now kind of leaning in and having some fun with kind of going against the grain of what you might expect from her performance, and it's effective. It like you said, it works in a way, and it fits in a way that a lot of other times it doesn't. So
Yeah, I think
and this is truly an amazing performance. It truly is.
I think that's all fair. I just want to say that as a kid growing up, I did not have that history with Betty White. I mean, the Golden Girls is something I was aware of. I've certainly seen. I know my grandma liked this show, but
Look,
when
we're not all children of culture, Chris. We won't hold it against you.
Okay. Well, when I think Betty White, like I think of this movie, Lake Placid. I want to say she co-hosted Candid Camera or something. Like I saw her pop up variety shows, but like this era of Betty White was my introduction to Betty White. So I knew her first as an old lady that quipped in a sometimes vulgar way or whatever it is. But I have obviously over time come to appreciate more the subversion as you described of what she was doing here. But yeah, I love her here. She just comes across as this sweet old lady. She talks about her husband dying. Casually says that she killed them because she's trying to cover up the fact that she knows about this crocodile. She's got maybe 3 scenes. I think 4 if you count the very end. So not a ton of screen time, but the moment she's on screen, I love the performance. But this movie, if I may, #PP, has a bit of a tone crisis. But whenever she's on screen, I think it's locked into the tone that I wish was consistent throughout the whole movie. But it's when I think the movie is most successful as a creature feature comedy.
I agree, and I agree with the tone thing because like there's moments where like Brendan Gleeson doing the sarcastic bit is like just a bit. It's not like a tone change to have a sheriff that's being sarcastic in these situations. But otherwise, a lot of the like Bill Pullman's character plays this largely completely straight the whole time. We'll talk more about him in a minute, but like he's playing it straight almost completely. And Bridget Fonda has like some extreme reactions, but overall she is also kind of playing this pretty seriously. There's one other character that kind of rides that line a little bit more, but overall she's one of the first characters that beyond like I think Brendan Gleeson more falls into this category than doesn't. She seems to be like, oh, it's a giant crocodile movie. That okay, let's roll with that. She's one of the few that is like making it a comedy. God, folks, this is what I have to deal with. But yeah, so she seems to get it. Other characters, but so yeah, the tone crisis I think is a very valid criticism where you've got kind of 2 different movies. Like the movie kind of wants to be this self-aware comedy, but then there's characters that are just so straightforward that it makes that seem like it doesn't quite line up. So I get it. I agree.
Andrew, you mentioned Bill Pullman. He plays Jack Wells. He's the game and wildlife officer and sort of our leading man. It's definitely an ensemble cast, but he seems to be like the one in charge of the whole operation here and make all the big decisions. Like you said, plays it totally straight, never really going for a laugh, never really going for anything. As I say, that sounds a little too harsh. But he's just right down the middle. Nothing too exciting here. I don't think he's doing a bad job by any means, but the script isn't really doing him any favors. He doesn't have a gimmick like a lot of these people do. You know, Oliver Platt's eccentricity or Bridget Fonda being a city girl out in the wilderness or Brendan Gleeson's dry humor. Bill Pullman is just a good guy, just a good old boy from the country and plays it well. But I love Bill Pullman though. Of course, you know, growing up in the 90s films, like Bill Pullman's everywhere. His first
Bill Pullman's still the president as far as I'm concerned. Like,
hell yeah. What a world. I want to be in that world, Andrew.
I do
his
too.
First role is in Ruthless People, comedy from the 80s.
Oh man.
That I love. It's so good. Andrew, have you watched it? I know we've talked about it. I think we bought it at the same time.
I have. It's a Zucker Abrams Zucker thing. The
yeah.
airplane guys. And I just that one like completely like blew by me. I have no idea how it did, but you definitely told me to go watch it, and I did. And Danny DeVito, Bette Midler, just 10 out of 10. Like,
Yeah,
just if you guys want to howl with laughter, go now.
And he does Spaceballs right after that. And then this is the point where I'm realizing, like, oh, he's kind of a comedic actor. Like, I didn't think of him like that way in the 90s, but that's certainly how he starts out. I'm going to come back to this. He does a movie called Brain Dead in 1989 that I'm not familiar with, but the 90s, like I'm talking about, he's in Casper, so alum of the show. And of course, Independence Day, which his speech in Independence Day just out of nowhere delivers one of the best monologues of any action film ever, and it's so good. And that is like the defining moment of his career as far as I'm concerned. Like, unironically, it's fantastic. I love it. So I'm thinking of him as like a pseudo leading man in movies in the 90s. That's, the era I grew up with. But Andrew, this movie Brain Dead comes out in 1989. I just clicked on the Wikipedia as I was going through his filmography. The poster's insane. It's like his face off of his body and stretched out on these. It looks very weird sci-fi. It looks like a cover for a comedic version of Face Off. I don't know what the plot is, but it stars Bill Pullman and Bill Paxton, who are intrinsically linked throughout their careers because they're two famous Bills that have heydays at the same time. And I know, Andrew, I don't think they look alike. I don't confuse them because of how they look. I sometimes mix up the names, but it's not because they look similar, but it's just because their career trajectories are so similar. But the fact that they star in a movie together and it looks insane, it does not have good reviews, but I feel like I just have to watch it.
Yeah. I was getting it confused with what's the one Peter Jackson did?
Oh, well, it's Dead Alive. That's not the one I'm talking about. The one with
that
the
might
weird
be
looking...
what I'm thinking of. Like,
he has one called Brain something, or is
Brain Dead? It's Brain Dead. Okay, yeah.
Is that also Dead
Dead
Alive? Because that has two names.
That might be it. Yeah, Dead Alive in North America. Brain Dead, Dead Alive. Yeah.
There
okay.
it is. There it is.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking because I was like, wait, is that the Bill?
So they're both called Brain.
Yeah,
they have the same title then. That's probably why it's called Dead Alive. I've always wondered why they changed the name for the American market. Maybe it's because Brain Dead already existed in 1989.
That would make sense.
There you go. Look at that. Mystery solved.
Bill Pullman is it's just such an interesting career too, because like you said, he starts off with this comedy stuff, a little Val Kilmer-ish, in that like Val Kilmer kind of cut his teeth on like comedic type stuff, and then kind of moves into this like, oh, I'm going to do like prestige drama things, and then does ebb back and flow into the comedy stuff, which Bill Pullman does as well. He's Casper is certainly a comedy, Scary Movie 4 is certainly a comedy, but he does do, this is just my excuse to mention David Lynch. He is in David Lynch's Lost Highway in 1997, where he has one of my favorite line deliveries of all time, where a very creepy character played by Robert Blake, is talking to him at a party, and he's talking about how like he's inside his house while he's speaking to him at the party, and just keeps talking about, he's like, oh, I've seen your house. I'm actually there right now. And Bill Pullman just leans in and he goes, that's fucking crazy, man. Sorry, you have to censor that, but it's just such like the monologue that Robert Blake gives is so creepy and unsettling, and just the way he just leads in, and that's the only thing he can think to say. I was like, this man's the greatest actor that ever lived, right? Like this is perfect. Obviously, David Lynch passed away very recently. We were recording these a little bit, but
R.I.P.
I'll save
David
my
Lynch for sure.
I'll save my emotional vomit about David Lynch for another time. But just
can I ask you a quick David Lynch question?
Yes,
I know one of your favorite filmmakers, favorite creators. I've never had anything negative to say about David Lynch by any means, but I don't think I've watched any of his movies beginning to end, because I got the feeling very early on that his movies probably just aren't for me. Which is, fine how it is. I think the one movie I made an earnest attempt to watch was Mulholland Drive.
Yep.
And I think I made it halfway, and I was like, this isn't working for me. I turned it off. That was like in high school. It was a long time ago. Maybe shortly after high school. Do I need to watch more David Lynch movies? Like, do you think that one movie is indicative of all of his films, or does he have things that are more accessible? Should I make another attempt?
I think Blue Velvet plays a little bit more straightforward while still having like the kind of otherworldly, ethereal nature. The story, I think, is a little bit more straightforward. Obviously, Dune is a much more straightforward narrative. There's things that he makes that are like, he starts with Eraserhead, which is definitely playing at all of the things that he's going to do, and then The Elephant Man is largely straightforward. It's just a story about the Elephant Man. Then does Dune, doesn't have a great time with it. Just doesn't like this experience. Almost was asked by George Lucas to direct Return of the Jedi. Does not, because George basically pitched him Return of the Jedi, and David Lynch was like, "So why aren't you doing this?"
Which is the response that George Lucas always gets from any director.
Yeah, like
he tries to
Lynch was just like, he's like, "This is yours. Like, everything you've built this entire world. Why don't you do this?" And he's like, "I don't want to," because, as David Lynch said, he's like, George Lucas doesn't love directing. He loves building the worlds. He loves making the ideas, but he doesn't want to direct it. And Lynch actually said, he's like, "I respect George a lot, because what George Lucas does is what George Lucas wants to do, and what Lynch does is what Lynch wants to do. He just specifies that what George wants to do makes hundreds of millions of dollars, while his don't." Does Dune. So Blue Velvet is, the narrative there's definitely some otherworldly strange stuff in it, but I think it plays a little bit more straightforward than Mulholland Drive does. Lost Highway is probably more in the Mulholland Drive category, where if the weird shifting narratives and seemingly disparate items kind of are an unsatisfying thing for you, I don't know that I'd really go dive into it. He does do a road movie in the late 90s, early 2000s called The Straight Story. That is possibly, pound for pound, the best film he's ever made. But it's also 100% straightforward. There's nothing weird about it at all. It's called The Straight Story, and I was like, this is... I think the joke is that it's called The Straight Story, and David Lynch was like, "All right, guys, you want a normal one? Here's a normal one." But I think Mulholland Drive is very, very good. I like it a lot. I understand that, but the thing I will say, and the thing I want to stress, is that I am aware more than anyone that David Lynch is not for everyone. That's not even touching Twin Peaks. Obviously, Twin Peaks is a whole different thing. But there is a confidence and vision, I said this in the Discord, with David Lynch that I don't know that any other filmmaker has. There's nobody who knows what they want their film to be, I think, more than David Lynch does. Now, the result of that film is something that can be quite polarizing and can be quite split reaction. But he knows what he wants his movies to be. And that is a rare thing. And the way I kind of always thought about it is, when I saw Lost Highway on the big screen, I was sucked in. Just whatever this narrative was, wherever it was going, I needed to know where it ended up. And when Twin Peaks: The Return came out, I was back in that space and just needed to see where this journey took me. And I was really, really hoping I was going to get that experience one more time. And I'm not. Nobody is. Which is okay. His legacy speaks for itself. But it is... I hoped to be able to see the world the way David Lynch did. And I probably won't ever see it that way, which is okay again. But there's a loss there, and the outpouring of kind of tributes from everyone from Steven Spielberg to Martin Scorsese to Kyle MacLachlan to Laura Dern to everybody, they speak for themselves. The legacy and the impact that man had on people is it speaks for itself. So anyway, if you want to watch Bill Pullman give the greatest line delivery in the history of film, watch Lost Highway.
I do need to watch Blue Velvet. The first thing I always think of is The Squid and the Whale, a movie I enjoy quite a bit. Noah Baumbach, I believe. In the movie, it's a period piece that takes place in the 80s. Jeff Daniels plays a wannabe intellectual writer type person, and his teenage son, played by Jesse Eisenberg, really idolizes him. And there's a scene where Jesse Eisenberg wants to take this girl to the movies, and I forget what lighthearted movie he suggests, but Jeff Daniels is like, I was thinking we could see Blue Velvet. It's supposed to be quite good. And so Jeff Daniels, his teenage son, and this girl that his teenage son likes, all go to see Blue Velvet. And there's like there's a shot of them in the theater just awkwardly watching this movie. And then they're talking afterwards, and he's like, so what'd you think? I thought it was quite erotic.
Yep.
Very funny. You got to check it out. Andrew, Lake Placid. That's the movie we're talking about. And it also stars Bridget Fonda as Kelly Scott. She's a paleontologist that works at a museum. She is sent to check this thing out after a tooth is recovered. They think it might be a dinosaur tooth, ends up being the tooth of a giant crocodile. She is, like I mentioned earlier, she goes from New York City out to the Maine, the woods of Maine. A lot of jokes about how she hates camping. She's scared of bugs. Doesn't want to be out in the wilderness. That's where this character's coming from. Bridget Fonda is interesting career here because she comes from like movie royalty. Of course, the Fondas is just generations of
speaks for itself.
Great actors, great films. But she has a sort of working man's career. Like I feel like, other than the fact that she gets roles when she's like a child because of her family, yeah, I get that. But you look at her roles, a lot of supporting stuff, a lot of really small bit parts, a few more high profile things, but it seems a career pretty much akin to anybody else's. It's not like the name just rocketed her to feature films. Small roles in things like Single White Female, Army of Darkness, Jackie Brown, I know that was big for her. Does Monkey Bone a few years after this, a movie that I genuinely cannot wait to talk about on this podcast one day. Then she marries Danny Elfman. They start a family, and that's been her life since. She pulls away from acting and the spotlight and takes care of her family.
She has not acted in anything since 2002. So
yeah,
just a few 3 years after this, she basically leaves the industry. Pretty wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but she does everything that's asked of her here. Like I said, unlike Bill Pullman, who we agree is kind of vanilla, she is given something to do, and she sinks her teeth into it and plays it well.
Yeah, I agree. She's a little definitely bordering on she's doing exactly what needs to be done here. She plays up the fish out of water or crocodile out of the lake situation of this, if you will.
Okay.
But hey,
I thought my
these
jokes
are the
were
jokes,
bad.
folks. These are the jokes, folks. Deal with it. She definitely is doing the whole I hate the outdoors. Very kind of like, oh god, I don't remember the character's name, so I'm not going to say it. But just not really a fan of the outdoors. Obviously, she's from museums. She's from labs. She's not really vibing with being outside and hunting this crocodile. She's not really cool with the fact that she has to be here at all, based off the circumstances of why. Based on this, her partner at the museum started cheating on her with this other coworker. So she comes out here to see this thing, and is providing her insight into kind of this creature. But yeah, doing exactly what needs to be done, and perfectly good.
Andrew, like I mentioned earlier, I had seen this movie before. I remember some parts of it. I remember it genuinely being kind of fun, knowing what it is. I thought, going into this, that my Mark Strong Award was going to go to Oliver Platt as Hector. I remember he was in this movie. I'm a pretty big fan of Oliver Platt, especially from this era. He does Three to Tango the same year, alongside Matthew Perry, who I've sung the praises of, one of my favorites. I quite enjoy that movie and that performance. He's got a small part in Bicentennial Man that has always stuck with me. There's this part in Bicentennial Man where, it's Robin Williams as the robot that's trying to become human, and he's talking to Oliver Platt because he wants the ability to have sex. And I don't remember the exact words, but Robin Williams is like, I've heard sex is like the greatest feeling, to truly give yourself to someone else and know what it means to physically express love. And he goes on, beautifully about the whole concept. And he asks Oliver Platt, "Is that true?" And Oliver Platt goes, "God, I hope so."
Oh no.
Very
man.
funny. I get probably a future episode of this podcast as well, Bicentennial Man. But
Probably.
anyway, I like Oliver Platt. He's got alum of the show yet again, Ready to Rumble. As someone who had never had aspirations to be an actor, this was never something I wanted to do. I think Oliver Platt has the career that I would want if it is something that I want. Like, just, you get high profile stuff, but you're not like, you can probably live a public life. I mean, he's really riding that line. I think he's great. I think he's a great character actor. But Andrew, this character, hashtag PP, what the hell are we doing here? He's a professor of mythology. He loves crocodiles. He swims with them. So that's what draws him out here. He's very, like, outwardly sexual in a way that I think the movie thinks he is charming and hypnotic and maybe a little kooky and eccentric, but hey, just go with it. But in the year 2025, I'm like, man, this guy is a massive creep. He should not be allowed by any of these people. Like, he should be slapped multiple times for the things that he says. And I don't just mean like he hits on women. It's so much more than that. It's like in the middle of a sentence being like, "You have big, wonderful boobs," and it's like, what am I supposed to do with that? Is this a joke? Am I supposed to like this character? Like, I truly, I don't know, Andrew. We've talked so much about pre 9/11 movies. This is a pre 9/11 movie. Just have a good time. Big crocodile loaded up with these kooky characters. I like that, and I do miss that. But the flip side of that is sometimes those characters are just I don't know, don't age well. Like, I imagine this played okay in 1999, but I don't have much positive to say about this character. No, I don't know. Like, I don't know, Andrew.
I don't have any. It's one of those things that you watch it back and you're just kind of like, wow. Like, and don't get me wrong, there's like some scenes where like he kind of like reveals that it's kind of all an act and it's all for show and it's kind of this weird thing that he does. But yeah, it just does not come off super well. Now, he's throwing himself into it and he's acting himself. He's acting, I'm assuming 100% exactly as the character is written. So I can't fault Oliver Platt whatsoever for this character. He's doing exactly what needs to be done. But yeah, Oliver Platt is great. He was on the Chicago Med for a long time recently. And then he's actually been a guest star on The Bear recently too. So like, still out there doing his thing. But here, this is the year before, or the year before, 2 years before Jimmy King. I don't remember exactly when Ready to Rumble was, but yeah. So in just a scant, so this is July 99, and Ready to Rumble was April 2000. So in a scant 10 months, he goes from hunting crocodiles to being WCW World Heavyweight Champion. So you talk about a career you'd like to have, Chris. There it is.
Andrew, that covers our main cast. It's a pretty tight scope here, so I think we need to talk about the scenes of this film. And of course, we're going to start with the best scene in the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So Andrew, kick us off here. When is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Lake Placid?
I guess if I had to pick like it's not really a single scene, but it's kind of a sequence. It's when they're going to trap the crocodile towards the end of the film. And their plan is to use one of Betty White's cows as bait to get the crocodile to come in towards land, and then they're going to try to catch it in a net. If you think that sounds like a dumb plan, I did too. But it's but Betty White says some like truly horrible things to this cop that's sitting there with her, and that's one of the scenes that stands out the most in my mind. She's like, "I hope you all get eaten. Is that a bad thing? Can you arrest me for wishing chewing on police officers?" Like, it's just truly like awful stuff. And then this does ultimately give way to our kind of big finale of the film, where we kind of have our final showdown with the crocodile. They're trying to catch it. They're trying to not kill it. They finally get it stuck in the helicopter, which definitely was the plan all along. You know it was. And we kind of get a moment where Bill Pullman like could choose to kill the crocodile, but he doesn't. He just tranks it so that it gets knocked out. And then we get surprise second crocodile, which Brendan Gleeson finally gets to use his giant gun to literally obliterate.
Yeah.
Just explodes the thing. And so yeah, this is where it all kind of comes to a head. We do get some good looks. Obviously, there's some CG for the crocodile here, but not gonna lie, I think the CG on this crocodile looks a little bit better than our CG of the sharks.
I agree. It looks pretty good.
I was actually kind of surprised. Yeah. And then we actually get what's kind of cool is when the crocodile is a little bit more stationary, not moving. We get some Stan Winston crocodile animatronics here, which are pretty cool. So this sequence is a good version of that. You get a lot of close-ups of the crocodile. It looks pretty good. I was impressed kind of watching it back, the CG. There's definitely some more spotty sequences, but I thought the stuff, especially at night, I don't know if night really helps with kind of hiding some of it, but I was kind of surprised with how it all looked, and definitely was the type of finale you expect from this sort of thing. Got you a giant explosion of one crocodile. We get to study the giant guy, and everybody kind of gets their moment to do something. And my boy Brendan Gleeson gets to blow up a crocodile with his giant gun. So 10 out of 10.
He says it was overrated or whatever, but that looked fun.
No,
I mean, come on.
There's no way that was overrated. Don't undersell that, buddy. You earned it.
I am going to agree. I just want to get hyper specific. My favorite scene specifically is in this sequence, but it is that reveal of a second crocodile. Because I think I totally didn't see it coming, even though it seems kind of obvious. Like, they never say this outright, but they're always like, why would the crocodile come up to mate? Why did it migrate so far? And by the end of the movie, we can put together that it came up there to mate and have babies. Just babies revealed at the very end. But it seems like, yeah, there could be more than one giant crocodile, but like, there's never any hints that there's more than one. So there's, again, that scene at the very end, the crocodile's tranked, it's caught up in the helicopter, it's not moving, Oliver Platt standing right next to it, and boom, out of the water, a croc grabs Oliver Platt and drags him in. Now, I wish it killed him, not because of what we said about his character earlier necessarily, but I think this moment would be more impactful is surprise, another croc, and it kills the main character. Nothing's going to top Samuel L. Jackson's scene from Deep Blue Sea, we talked about last month, but it would have that same feel of just out of nowhere. You don't see it coming. It's smart reveal. It's something that wasn't expected. I wish it killed him, but even without, I just think the reveal of a second croc is great, and also one of my favorite lines of the movie. Oliver Platt, again, he gets bit, but he gets released, and he keeps saying, there's two of them, there's another crocodile, there's two of them. Brendan Gleeson obliterates it with a grenade launcher and says, back to one. That's a really good line. Really good quote by our boy Brendan Gleeson there. Yeah, so it's great. I like that little moment. Going back to Roger Ebert's review, he was talking about Deep Blue Sea already at the beginning here, like, even when it's tried and true territory, you can do it effectively, and you can leave room for surprises and innovation. This movie does not have nearly as many as Deep Blue Sea, but this moment, I do think, is a smart moment.
Yeah, I agree. that's why I picked it. But it's a it ultimately does. It's a movie that kind of, I don't know what the nice way to say this is, but there's a lack of stakes. Not that that's an awful thing, but like you said, everybody survives. Like the only person who ends up getting killed by the crocodile is the diver at the beginning, and then like one of the sheriff's deputies. None of our main characters. Some of them come close, but none of the rest of them really face any kind of consequences. But it definitely creates an air of, nothing's going to happen to anyone. So that ending would if the croc had gotten somebody, the second croc, because ultimately the second crocodile is like, doesn't really serve a purpose. Like it's just there so we can use the big blow up gun. It like appears out of nowhere. We've never been given a single moment to this point to suggest that there's a second crocodile.
Yeah.
And yeah, it just kind of appears out of nowhere. But yeah, I would have been okay if Oliver Platt's character had met his end here. For a variety of reasons. So
there's a moment. I don't want to harp on this too much, but again, this character, oh boy. In particular, there's this like deputy that he hits on a lot, and she seems to like it and like him back. And there's a moment where the two of them are out on the helicopter, and he wants to go swimming with the croc, and she's trying to tell him not to. She literally says, "This is the dialogue. Please just get back inside. I'll have sex with you."
She's using sex to lure him in. It's so weird.
It is such a men writing women moment, which
yes.
The whole character of Hector, the girl from New York, the whole reason she goes out is because her boyfriend cheated on. Like, there's a lot of moments like that, but this is like, what are we doing here? And it's all the more surprising because David E. Kelley in his TV work is known for like Ally McBeal and Big Little Lies and like well-written, well-rounded female characters. So I don't know where this is coming from, other than it's trying to be maybe like a throwback campy movie. I don't know. It's weird. We said already this movie has just a lot of tones and it bounces around, and that's #PP, maybe its biggest fault. Another way it changes tones a lot, though, is with the crocodile attacks, because, Andrew, they're pretty gruesome. Like, the very first attack, the croc eats half of a scuba diver. Brendan Gleeson pulls him out of the water. Literally has no legs and his guts are hanging out. It decapitates another guy. They find his severed head later. A snake crawls out of the mouth of the severed head. Like, it's gnarly stuff you would find in more like a conventional horror movie. But at the same time, you've got the character of Hector, and you've got these jokes and quips and stuff, and you've got Betty White's character, and it's just all over the place. I think, again, #PP, if it chose one lane and stuck with it, we'd have a stronger movie here. But there's something to be said for just throwing everything into the soup and seeing what comes out. It may not always work, but it does give this movie a unique feel, maybe even a unique charm for some people.
Yeah. 36% of audiences, or however many that was.
Brendan Gleeson, he is great in this movie. There's a part where they find a severed toe, a human toe, and I feel like we were pretty hard on Oliver Platt and that character, and rightfully so for a lot of stuff. But his interactions with Brendan Gleeson specifically, the two of them together, work very well off of each other. I want to give them both credit for that. And there's a part where Oliver Platt holds up the toe and says, "Is this the man that was killed?" And Brendan Gleeson says, "He seems taller." It's a pretty good joke, Andrew.
Yes, pretty good.
Man, there's this scene where they're all out in canoes before they know exactly what they're dealing with, and the croc just flips over the canoe, sending two of the characters into the water. And the scene ends before we see them get back into the canoe. It's kind of weird editing, but my note was just, I would never. For one, I wouldn't be on that lake in a canoe. For two, if I get flipped over like that, I'm going back to New York. I'm done. Bye. Like, there's no way I'm messing with this thing.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of moments in this movie where I'm like, I'd be out. Like, the feds are coming. I'm done. Like, it ain't worth dying, man. It never is. But yeah, that one especially. There's several moments with her, like, because she complains about being there a lot, and then there's like this moment where she like is suddenly in and like wants to be a part of it, but like you don't really know why. It's not really made very clear.
Sure,
but
yeah.
that moment for sure, I would have been like, all right, guys, you handle the rest of this without me.
Andrew, there's a lot of scuba diving in this movie, which,
There is.
gosh, scuba diving in a murky lake is gross. If I'm
Horrible.
going underwater like that, like I need like an old school 1920s diving suit. Like I don't the thing in the mouth. It just does not look like a good time to me. But a lot of scuba diving, a lot of people jumping into the water in their scuba gear. We get to see that classic thing where they're in their wetsuit. They put the breathing thing in their mouth, and then they fall backwards in the water. Always fall backwards into the water. And fun fact, Andrew, do you know why scuba divers do that?
No.
Because if they fell forward, they would still be in the boat.
I hate you.
Ah, man.
I loathe everything about you.
Is it not true, Andrew? Is it not true?
No, it's not true.
It is
Like,
true.
why would it be true?
Before they still be in the boat. Andrew,
Mm.
of all the potential faults and tone shifts, this is the weirdest thing I find. Genuinely, the weirdest decision David E. Kelly makes. The lake in this movie is not called Lake Placid. The movie's called Lake Placid, but the lake, I think I said it in my synopsis. What is it? Black Lake? It's called Black Lake. And they address it in the movie. They're like, oh, they wanted to call it Lake Placid, but that name was already taken. Why? This is all fictional. This is all made up. Why, in your made up world of Lake Placid, do you not just call the lake Lake Placid? Just make that the name of the lake. Why would the sheriff know what people were considering naming the lakes, presumably decades previous? Like, why is the fact that another Lake Placid in the world exists a reason not to name it Lake Placid? I promise you, there's lakes with the same name all across the world. Why is it not just called Lake Placid? Why the movie's called Lake Placid? Why not just make your lake Lake Placid?
I truly, honestly do not
It's
know.
so weird.
It makes no sense. Like, because there is a Lake Placid. There's several Lake Placid. It's like there's not even just one. Like, you know, it's you know, isn't that where the 1980 Winter Olympics were? Yeah. Known as Lake Placid, 1980, held in Lake Placid, New York. Like, it's clearly a place. So I don't know if like they wanted to shoot it at Lake Placid in New York, but that was too expensive, so they just moved it somewhere else. But they wanted to keep the name of Lake Placid. I don't know if we're trying to bank off of the fact that Placid is like calm and peaceful. And there's no real movement. Like that's, you know, the joke they make in the movie. That's why they wanted to call it Lake Placid, because it's a very calm lake. But like, I don't know. It truly, honestly, is something where I don't know. Like, obviously, if you call it Black Lake, I don't know that you quite get the same effect. But
yeah, so just
I
make
don't
the
know.
Lake Placid. Just make that. I don't know. Is
Call it Lake
the
Placid.
real Lake
Who
Placid
cares?
so well known that they worry to be confusing? I don't know. If I ever meet Brendan Gleeson, I'll ask him why he says the word sarcastic out loud. And if I ever meet David E. Kelly, I'm like, why didn't you just call your lake Lake Placid? And then I'll put those mysteries to rest.
okay, sounds good.
Andrew, here is what Roger Ebert had to say about Lake Placid. Not as glowing a review, he just gives it 1 out of 4 stars. He wraps up his review like this. The movie is pretty bad, all right, but it has a certain charm. It's so completely wrong-headed from beginning to end that it develops a doomed fascination. We can watch it switching tones within a single scene, sometimes between lines of dialogue. It's gruesome, and then camp, and then satirical, and then sociological, and then it pauses for a little witty intellectual repertoire. Repartee? Occasionally, the crocodile leaps out of the water and snatches victims from the shore, looking uncannily like a very big green product from the factory where they make Barney toys. This last line.
What?
This last line is so brutal. This is the kind of movie that actors discuss in long, sad talks with their agents. I can see Bill Pullman having a long conversation about, you want me to do what? Hashtag PP, of course. He puts that in an interview. He ends it with hashtag PP. Not as glowing as Deep Blue Sea, but in true positivity podcast fashion, he does find a few things to sing the praises of. But I just want to track this as we continue through Big Animal Month. Roger Ebert's take, which ones he thinks work and don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Glad you remembered.
That would have been embarrassing. Andrew, having a heck of a time with, of course, the theme of the month and just being back in the groove in general. I like movies, man. I like talking about movies. I like talking about movies with you, buddy, and making this podcast. It's good to be back in the saddle.
Ditto.
We revamped things a little bit coming back here, and one of the new features is Ask Andrew, which we'll be doing at the back end of these episodes. And as we proved last week, it's not always going to be movie or comic book related. It can be anything, and by nature of recording these episodes ahead of time, the people don't know about this yet, but when you are hearing this, if you want to drop any suggestions for what we should be asking Andrew, anything goes. I will make a spot to do so in the Discord, but for now, I guess it's all up to me, and it's something I should probably start planning ahead of time instead of off the cuff at the end of these episodes. Andrew, I want to revisit something I think came up previously on Mike. And I'll preface it with a few questions. Andrew, what would you say is the shark movie?
I mean, it has to be Jaws, right? Like, you can't.
I think so.
Can't like you can't go against like. There are like tropes of Jaws that are still being used. I mean, there's tropes of Jaws in this movie. Like, you don't see the crocodile for a significant portion of this film's runtime. Like, you don't see it at all. It plays very heavily into that we're gonna, less is more type attitude. And you can... I can't think of a single other shark movie that has the genuine, like, critical response that Jaws does, which is that almost everybody accepts that it's a tremendously well-made film, from all aspects: writing, directing, acting, everything. There's not a single shark movie I think that could even come close to that. Like, there's just not. It's one of those things where you made Jaws, and then every shark movie is basically destined to live in that shadow. If you're making it earnestly, I guess that is. When you see something like Sharknado, obviously it's still in the shadow of Jaws, but it's not like
it's not trying to be the next Jaws,
serious.
For sure.
It's not trying to be that. It's trying to just be ridiculous and silly, which is what you get by the time you get to Jaws 4. But
now, Andrew,
yeah,
this one's gonna be maybe a little bit trickier. I don't know. What would you say is the World War II film?
Yeah, thinking about Nazis right now is something I really want to do. If I think of the one that sticks in my brain the most, and this is a cheat, I guess, Inglourious Bastards is up there for me, just because
interesting.
You have some extremely iconic performances. Like, that movie makes Christoph Waltz pretty much in one scene. Probably one of the best opening scenes of all time. Inglourious Bastards. Just the true, honest gravity of the performance that he's giving. Hitler gets shot in the face a lot. That ranks it pretty high up as far as
Pretty
I'm
cool.
concerned. But obviously it's, playing kind of as like a pseudo World War II exploitation film with the violence that it's doing. Obviously it turns things in a different direction by going like a kind of alternate history route. So I can see why some people would not really consider it a World War II movie in the classic sense of the term. Man, I don't know. There's been a lot of really gruesome movies about World War II. That's a tougher one.
Okay, Andrew, this one should be back to being pretty easy. I'll come back to this with my thoughts because I think you're about to see where I'm going with this whole thing. Andrew, what is the dinosaur movie?
I mean, Jurassic Park feels Steven Spielberg on this. Oh. It's just all Steven Spielberg. That would it.
Well, maybe. I mean, there's no. Obviously, this is subjective, and there's no right or wrong for any of this, right? But I think the shark movie has to be Jaws. The dinosaur movie has to be Jurassic Park. The World War II movie, my answer would probably be Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Right? Or you could even say Schindler's List and still make an argument for that. So, again, there's no right or wrong. I got to think if you were to do a poll or whatever, if we go back to World War II, I think.
Yeah.
Saving Private Ryan is up there. And I'm trying to think, now I'm trying to kind of reverse engineer going through his filmography if he has any more movies that are the definitive blank. E.T. could be, I don't know, the definitive family alien movie, but we're starting to get pretty specific there. But he also does Close Encounters. He could have the definitive alien movie of some kind for all I know. But does Steven Spielberg have the blank movie? I think 2 of them are in their bag. I think maybe even 3, depending on where you fall in World War II. Maybe there's some more in his filmography. So I'm trying to think of other filmmakers that...
I've seen a lot of people say that Raiders of the Lost Ark is one of the best action adventure movies. I don't really know that that's a genre, but
well, there's this whole genre we've talked about a lot of the throwback to the serials, right? Which is kind of how
I think that's kind of what action
from.
adventure, the Indiana Jones, the Mummy, stuff like that, where you've just got this kind of classic adventure. And Steven Spielberg also made Empire of the Sun, which is also it's Japan's invasion of China during World War II. So he's made several World War II movies. He's also made he made Amistad. He's got War of the Worlds.
He did Amistad and The Color Purple. So Black.
Don't say it out loud.
Yeah,
don't say it out loud.
I'm kidding.
Don't do it. He's got, a lot, and obviously Jaws is the definitive shark movie. I think Jaws and Jurassic Park being the definitives there. World War II, probably a little bit more esoteric, but I still think Saving Private Ryan is probably the historical accuracy. Again, just looking at all the factors, all the aspects, it's pretty hard to fight that. Inglourious Bastards, I guess for me, is just more enjoyable to watch. It's more cathartic, I guess, in a way, just because World War II movies can be very bleak. Because it's a bleak situation. Steven Spielberg also made Munich. I don't know if you've seen Munich, but pretty great. So it turns out that Steven Spielberg guy just makes good movies. But yeah, I think it's really hard to go against that.
I had this buddy that said they didn't like Munich because there's a scene where someone walks into an apartment and I think it's after the bomb has gone off, and there's a ceiling fan still spinning, and it's got a severed arm on the fan, and he's like, that would weigh too much. It would bend the fan blade. That's so unrealistic. And he was not joking about the complaint. I don't know if it actually ruined the whole movie for him, but that has always stuck with me.
He wasn't mad about all the white guys playing Middle Eastern people?
I don't know. This was quite a long time ago. I'm trying to think of other directors that can claim a the type film. Like, I think certainly Martin Scorsese has, well, what do you think of I was about to say I guess I don't know. I was going to say the gangster movie, the mob movie, but maybe not.
Godfather is right over there.
Exactly. And then I was like, oh, Godfather is like mob. So maybe he has like gangster, but you've got like the Untouchables. You've got, so I don't know. I don't know if that's
I think there's a very
definitive.
specific type of gangster movie that he kind of had. Like Goodfellas and Casino alone, I think kind of stand as these kind of gangster movies, and even like, you know, crime gangster. I don't know specifically what you want to call it, but yeah, like, but that's a tougher one just because. Well, and it's always funny to me when people say like all Scorsese makes is gangster movies, and I'm like, he really doesn't. Like, he really, really doesn't. Like, he's done a lot of other stuff in that filmography.
Hugo is my favorite gangster movie, personally.
Yeah,
those little gangster kids.
You know, those gangster kids.
Andrew, what is the Vietnam movie?
Man, that one is probably tougher.
I mean, there's so
Vietnam comes to mind, but
there's so many. Apocalypse Now,
Jacket, Apocalypse Now, like Deer
so
Hunter, like Platoon,
if you go Apocalypse
Now,
if you go Apocalypse Now, that would give
Francis Ford Coppola could
have the mob movie, the Vietnam movie. Yeah.
The Dracula movie? No, definitely not.
Is Dracula the Dracula movie? How could it not be, right?
No, if anything, it's probably the Bela Lugosi one. But no. God,
well, that's the one I was referring. Is Dracula the? Yeah.
There's a lot of movies called Dracula, man. But the Conversation is the definitive neo-noir about using audio devices to spy on people.
Obviously, if you want to get hyper specific with the genre, you can probably find any director and make them, have.
Is there any definitive movie that you think Christopher Nolan has made?
Honestly, I was about to make that joke, like the movie about going in someone's brain and implanting an idea.
But it's like if somebody told me Dunkirk was their like definitive World War II movie, I don't know that I think that was that crazy.
That's yeah. I mean, it's so specific. Yeah. I agree. It's not crazy. It's a great movie.
I think that movie is actually pretty underrated in his filmography. I don't know really how it's viewed overall, but just like it's tight, it's lean, it's knows exactly the story that it's telling, gets in and out in like 100 minutes. Like, it's not very long. 106 minutes, sub 2 hours. Like, probably his shortest movie by far, but like very good. Although I guess Oppenheimer is also a World War II movie.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Dunkirk was the highest grossing World War II movie worldwide until it was surpassed by Oppenheimer.
There you go. So you can really make an argument.
It's kind of like when James Cameron's highest grossing film, Titanic, was outgrossed by James Cameron's Avatar.
Christopher Nolan, the movie about short-term memory loss. A lot of people say The Dark Knight is the Batman movie,
the definitive Batman movie. Yeah, you could say that. I think that there's an easy layup. It's probably that one. Like, the Batman movie is probably The Dark Knight.
I don't know. I just thought it'd be a fun thought experiment. What is the blank movie? Who's racked up the most of them? I think
Spielberg has genuinely more than one that are pretty uncontestable. So
yeah. Although, let's look at. We'll do one more, then we'll get out of here. Robert Zemeckis might have the time travel movie. You might have the.
Yeah.
If you can find a category for Forrest Gump, Americana nostalgia movie. There might be something there. The Vietnam movie, that one segment. Castaway is the. Stranded on a desert island movie. I don't know. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is the, what do you call it, mixed media movie?
The animation live action blend movie.
Yeah.
Death Becomes Her is the American satirical surrealistic black comedy fantasy film about women staying alive after they die. The Mark, she'll be furious. He's probably got the Tom Hanks movie in his filmography. I don't know if you want to go that granularly, but between Castaway and Forrest Gump and a bunch of other stuff, I bet a lot of people would say that Zemeckis has directed the Tom Hanks movie.
But Spielberg might have it with Saving Private Ryan, so I don't know. Catch Me If You Can. Okay, it's.
Would you say Back to the Future is the time travel movie?
Well, just in a pop culture sense, yeah. Right? Like I've sung the praises.
I can't deny that it's got way more awareness and cultural notoriety than something like Bill and Ted does.
Yeah,
and like stuff like the original Time Machine with Rex Harrison, or even the more recent ones with Guy Pearce. Like those are all cool, and they're based off the H.G. Wells novel, but like they don't have any like cultural awareness. Like there's no real and like stuff like Groundhog Day, which probably still doesn't have the awareness Back to the Future does. They're not really time travel movies. That's a different thing.
A time loop movie.
Time loop movies. But
I've sung the praises of like Primer, but it's like an indie movie that it does not. Is nowhere near the cultural awareness of any of the movies you just listed.
No.
I just think it's so specifically about time travel that I think of it as the time travel movie, but that's not really the spirit, I think, of what we're getting at here. So yeah, I think it's got to be Back to the Future.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. But I want to hear from all of you. Weigh in, hop into that Discord, and let us know what the movie you can come up with and who directed it and who's responsible for the most of them. I would love to continue this thought experiment with all of you. Hop into that Discord. There's a link right there in the show notes. Come back next week as Big Animal Month continues, where we'll be talking about Congo, also from the 90s, and also I don't know if the animals are bigger than normal in that movie, but damn it, we're going to do it this month anyway. We'll answer that question. It's a movie I've seen several times, but not in quite a while. We'll check in with old Roger Ebert on his thoughts on that movie, if I remember to do that on the episode. And until then, please remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. But like this era of Betty White was my introduction to Barry White. Barry White?
Barry White.
Whoop, that's a different person.